Hi there, Mr. Hardy here. Welcome. As we get started into this year, I just wanted to, before we got into our first lesson here, just to discuss a little bit about how class works with these. So as you'll see here, I've got the notes up here, and then you picked up, hopefully already, another packet that says Unit 1 Practice. We'll get to the practice in a little bit. The notes, though, this is where you're going to have everything that we do in this first unit for examples, real quick, easy place to do. So I would suggest, since they're 3-hole punched, putting them in a 3-ring binder if you have that option, or a folder's fine too, but just some place that you can keep hold of those. Doesn't mean you don't need to pay attention in class anymore since there's a video here. It just means that you've got an option if you're gone or just have one of those days or want to check something else out later. So with that in mind, let's jump into day one here. And unfortunately, even though you wouldn't know this yourselves because you haven't dealt with me before, normally when I get into notes and stuff, I will number pages because it's just easier for me to reference them when I'm talking about them on Classroom or here. But start of the school year, it happens. So we'll just have to kind of work our way through here, or maybe we'll number these as we go. That's not a bad idea. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to number this with a 1 here. And so what you'll notice here with our notes is there's not going to be on a lot of days. At most, it'll probably be the front of one piece of paper. In some days, instance, you'll see here, like 3 examples. I'll do some of the practice with you to kind of get you going. I want to be respectful of your time, but at the same time, I want you to use the resources. So, without further ado, let's get into our day 1 notes here that we have here on 1.1 evaluating expressions. Now, it may have been a little while for some of you since you've seen some of this. I don't know your backgrounds yet, but I will get to know them as we start here. So order of operations, PEMDAS. So reminder on PEMDAS. We're going to add a couple things in here. So with PEMDAS, the P stands for parentheses. Now, when we're talking about parentheses, we're talking about the parentheses like are down here with an actual operation going on. Not, I'm going to be known for this as well. I'm the sticky note guy. So when we do parentheses, we mean something like, hey, you're supposed to do 4 plus 2 inside the parentheses first. Not 9 times 8, because sometimes we use parentheses instead of the multiplication. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about an actual operation that goes on inside. So we want to make sure we keep that in mind. So that's always going to be what we look for first. If we don't have any of those, or once we've done the parentheses, our next job, number 2, is going to be exponents. Anything with an exponent, and we'll chat a little bit more about some of the specifics of that when we get down here, but that always is number 2. So then we keep going along, and this is where it starts to take a little bit of a twist that we got to be aware of. Number 3, we get 2 things. We get multiply, and we get divide. So you're like, well, wait a minute. So what happens then if I have both in a problem? Like, do I get to pick which one that I do? Do I get to do which one I think is easier? How does that work? And whenever you're doing these are always going to be going from left to right. Okay, so if I have multiple things being multiplied, like I do in a situation like this, maybe, you do the one on the left first, because that's always going to be the safest route and the correct route to do it anyway. And then finally, the end of our PEMDAS here, number 4, my pens are not wanting to work here at the start of the year either, must still be in summer mode, is going to be add and subtract. And this also works from left to write. Okay, so there's my P, my E, my M, my D, my A, my S, written out with some of the different things that go along with that. And then going along with that part, okay, is what's called evaluating, which means instead of just putting together the pieces that are alike or doing the add, subtracting, and having all the numbers there already, sometimes you're going to substitute numbers in for the variables. They'll be given to you. Then you're going to use order of operation to tell you what order to do them in. Okay? And then an expression is a combination of different terms, okay? Different from an equation, okay? When we have an expression, that is not an equation because equations we're solving for something, okay? So in this case, there's no equals sign if it's an expression, and that's what these three things are. So when it says evaluate the expression, if x equals 5 and y equals -4, that just means you're going to plug in a 5 everywhere there is an x, and you're going to plug in a -4 everywhere there is a y. And I know different teachers do this differently, so forgive me if you've been taught a different way. We can discuss it in class. We can see there's lots of good ways to go about this. But here, for instance, and I'm going to try to use colors to help this out a little bit. So I'm going to be using red and blue. I always will have colors available either on the back table or up front at my desk if you like to do some color coordinating here as well. So we're going to stick in a 5 for the x. And we're going to stick in a -4 for the y. Now, with me, whenever I'm doing something with a negative, I always put it in parentheses, just so it makes a little less confusion. You're like, well, now what do I do? You know, it's plus minus here. You can put it in plus minus in a calculator, but I really don't think we need a calculator in this point, because once I look at this, I go, okay, let's start from the beginning. Parentheses, ooh, okay, I'm doing this addition, this sum in the parentheses. So this is my first job. So, pardon me for that. I'm using my home computer today, and it likes to throw some messages up on me now. None. So 5 plus -4 is like saying I got $5 and somebody took 4 away, which means I'm only going to have 1 left. Okay, so we do that first. There are no exponents this time. Okay, my next thing would be to do the multiplying. So 7 times 1 is 7, and I'm done. So let's take care of the elephant in the room right now. I know what some of you are thinking if you didn't do this already. You're like, Hardy, I can just type that directly into my calculator and get the answer. Why am I going to bother doing this? Decent question, and here's my answer. There will be times that we're going to be just dealing with the variables. We're not going to be evaluating. You can't stick 7x and 7y in your calculator. You're going to have to understand what steps to do things in order to do it correctly. So you'll hear me say this a lot. Do you have to show work on stuff every time? No. On something like this, though, I want you to show it, because even though you can whip to the answer and pat yourself on the back, in the long run, it's going to bite you in the butt. So it's your call. It's your call on that. Okay. Next part here. And this is a place where you can get burned by the calculator if you're not careful. Let me explain. So we got x squared. So 5 squared plus -4 divided by 3. Now, here is one of those situations that, again, if I were at school, this would be a little bit easier to show you, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to see this on the calculator I pull up here momentarily. But here's what you've got to watch for in this instance. If you type this into your graphing calculator on your phone, whatever it is that you do, let's see if I can do this way on here. This ought to be interesting. So let's pull up, and I'll talk about this app more as we go along here too. Let's see if I can tune this down enough. Am I going to be able to see it? Of course not. All right, we'll change up here a minute. All right, we'll change up to a regular calculator. So I'm just going to type this in the way that I would see it normally. So I pull up my calc and I'm like, all right, so 5 squared plus, and actually, oh, there it is, -4 divided by 3. Okay, so I get this big old decimal thing. Well, here's the problem. Your calculator is going to want to do some things right away that aren't going to be good for us long term. For instance, here, okay, I'm going to want to do my 5 squared first, which is 25. So I'm just going to rewrite this out. Plus -4 over 3. Now, you might say, and maybe you're thinking this too, because your calculator would. Well, what happened here? Hardy, division is next. Divide comes before add, so I got to divide first. Well, here's the problem. You're dividing by this whole thing. Well, this thing's not even simplified yet. You're like, ooh, are you going to start doing this crazy stuff and breaking the rules already? I'm not breaking the rules, though, because you have to know what this is before you can divide it by 3. So normally what I'll do in an instance like this is if I see a fraction that's like this, I'll even go so far at the beginning of the problem to put parentheses around it, only if it's a fraction, okay, a big fraction like that, because now I don't have the dilemma of thinking, I'm like, oh, parentheses come before divide anyway, and I use my head, I use the calculator, whatever. 25 plus -4 is 21 divided by 3, and I get my answer. It doesn't mean if you get a fraction or a decimal, you got the wrong answer, okay? You're going to get those sometimes. But knowing little tricks and things like that, star that one, might help us out in the long run. So just something to consider. And so our last one that we're going to do on here, and then like I said, we'll chat a couple practice ones too. 3y squared minus y. Now, no, I can't take a y away from there right now. We'll get into that when we talk a little more with like terms and stuff a little later in the unit. But for now, again, copy what you see. So 3 parentheses, 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 people. It will keep you out of so many problems. Okay. Hardy, I want to just put this in the calculator and be done. I know that would be the easy way out, but easy is not always best. So here we go. Parentheses, remember, this is multiplied. There's not an operation going on inside like there was in the first one. So these are not those parentheses. Our first thing is exponents. Now, here's the first deal. That exponent is only going to what's directly in front of it here in the parentheses, to the -4. So when you type -4 squared in parentheses in your calculator, you're going to get +16. Now, if you were not in class and this is your first time seeing this, I want you to do something else on your calculator, and it's this. Type in -4 squared, no parentheses, and see what happens. I'll show you over here what happens. Spoiler alert. If you just type in -4 squared, your calculator is going to say -16. You're like, well, why is that? That's weird, because you just told me that -4 squared is 16, and that's the correct answer. And here's why. because negative 4 squared means I'm doing negative 4 times negative 4, and negative times negative is positive. Well, then why is my calculator wrong up here? It's not. Your calculator is squaring the 4, which would be 16, then putting the negative on it because the parentheses aren't there. That's where doing this stuff manually will help you become a better math student. And that's where we've got to be careful. So, don't want that. We want this. So we got our 3 times 16. Multiply and subtract are left. Multiply comes before subtract. So multiply those together. And the last thing that could catch us, be careful. What happens if you minus a negative? Okay. Another word for minus is opposite. So the opposite of minusing 4 would be to add 4, and we get our answer. Okay. So keep those handy, because some of those little tricks and things could come in very handy as we do things. So just something to be aware of. So as we head now to the lesson, I'm just going to switch these out. Now, I'm not going to do a ton of these. I just, again, want to explain to you some of the things that we do and how you can find things. I will always have keys up, both at the front of class and on Classroom. So if you want to check things as you go, which is a good idea, you can. And so what we're going to do here on our first day is you'll notice I have levels. Now, some assignments will have these, some won't. Level 1 just means it's the basics and we got this good. Level 2 means we're a little above that. We're going to make things a little more complex, maybe stick in a word problem here and there to see if we're catching on. And then level 3 is where I'm going to do stuff where I'm going to see if I can trick you. If you can somehow get to the point where you're nailing the level 3, you're a rock star with this. Do you have to be able to do level 3 to do well in here? No, but again, challenge yourself. Make yourself better every day. So let's do one out of each level just to kind of see what's going on here, and then we'll chat a little bit about what's going on the back of your page here too. So evaluate the variable expression if C equals 4 and D equals 2. Those are both pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go to number 3 because it's worded a little different. I want to make sure that we understand what we're getting at here. Number 3, given y equals 3x minus 8, what is the value of y when x equals 4? Okay, all that's saying is substitute that in for x and then just tell me what you get at the end. Because if all I know is the x value, so I take out the x, I plug in the 4, 3 times 4, because again, PEMDAS, multiply becomes before subtract. And you find out what y equals. You're not going to plug y into anything. You're just figuring out what that equals when that particular variable equals a number. Okay? So, now to kind of take that a step further, let's say we come down and we do number 8, let's say, for instance. Circle the mistake. Now, when it says that, it means there is a mistake. It's not, well, is there a mistake or not? Oh, no, there's a mistake. Then redo the work in order to find the correct answer. Okay, so they give me the problem right here. Here's how I like to tackle these. This is just me. I kind of ignore this for the moment. I'm like, I'm just going to do this problem. Y equals x squared plus 7. What's the value of y when x equals negative 5? So I'm going to take this negative 5 and I'm going to plug it in there. Now, this is where we see, if we remember what Hardy was telling us when we were doing notes. When you are substituting a value, especially if it's a negative, use parentheses. Because even if you're using the calculator at this point, that's going to help you. Because now it's like, oh yeah, it was this whole business again. If it's in parentheses, it's going to come out positive. Right. So negative 5 squared is 25 plus 7 is 32. Okay, I'm pretty sure that's the right answer. So now I come back over here and I'm like, all right, well, they plugged in -5. Oh, but they got -25 here. Oh, here's my problem. Okay. Use parentheses, use -5 in parentheses, and then it'll be right. That's the type of thought process I want you to start thinking through, because math isn't just about numbers. It's about being able to express yourself and think outside the box and think logically. That's the goal here that we're working for. Okay, so here on the front, that's where we're locking things down. When we get to the back, here's what I want you to do for today, okay? I want you to do the problems that you remember from your pre-algebra class or your Algebra 1 class that you did in middle school, okay? If you don't remember your perimeter and area right away, that's okay. That's what we're going to start tomorrow with and talk about a little bit in class. Simplify using your calculator. Again, be careful on little things. You're like what? Like, again, if you see a big fraction and there aren't parentheses there, you put the parentheses in. Otherwise, you can follow these right along and put them in your calculator. And again, there's answers down here at the bottom, so you can kind of check as you go as well. And you may not have noticed, and I'm probably going to kick myself in the hiney for having told you this, but the answers for the front of your sheet are all here too. They're mixed up, so maybe you can mark them off as you go, but that's how this is going to work. So there's our intro to day number 1 of class. Again, pay good attention in class, ask questions and things, but always have this to refer back to if you need it. We'll see you next time.